All right, you can begin when you're ready.
恭敬大德圣听，为此法会及一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生脱世，离苦得乐。速成无生 Will the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to live suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death, and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto sucheto ye alahati sanmiao sanbuddho che. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, and all good knowing advisors, welcome to this week's excuse me, exploration of Buddhist principles, the Dharma, using the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra as the foundation or as the vehicle. And we'll begin by reciting Medicine Master Buddha's name 7 times. I'm just going to mute myself while I try to clear my throat, excuse me. Okay, I'm going to invite everyone to join me in putting our palms together. Namo, quelling disasters, lengthening life, medicine master, Buddha. 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 Medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one, Medicine master does come one. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. Let me bring up the slides for today. This slideshow. So we are still on the topic of precepts, sila, and what we're going to do next week is we will, how do I put it? Do a quick recap. We won't do it this week. I thought of doing it this week, but we have a bit to cover. So next week, we'll do a recap about what we've been doing so far. We are still on the topic of precepts and sila. And let's just go into this week. Okay, so I would like to share with you this week. And before I do that, let me try to clear my throat again. Excuse me. Okay, while I'm trying to clear my throat, does anyone have any questions they would like to share? Any questions? If you do, you can type it into the chat box. Okay, so Ita Sutta is about what is welcome. And it is part of us trying to understand what cause and effect is all about. And why we're doing cause and effect, because that's what precepts are about. Precepts are about, precepts are there to help us plant wholesome causes so that the results or the effects that we get are also wholesome. So this particular sutta is the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and one of the Buddha's chief lay disciples, who is known as Anathapindika. Anathapindika, I think he's known as as the foremost of the Buddha's lay disciples, and he is extremely rich. Okay, Anathapindika, he is extremely rich. And at the end of this sutta, Ron, I will address your question regarding tending as a layperson, managing money, but how not to go overboard. So I'll just read the sutta. It says, then Anathapindika, the householder, went to the Blessed One, and on arrival, having bowed down to him, sat to one side. As he was sitting there, the Blessed One said to him, said, these 5 things, householder, are welcome, agreeable, pleasant, and hard to obtain in the world. Which 5? Okay, so Buddha is saying there's 5 things that not everyone can get because it's hard to obtain. And what are the 5 things that everyone wants? It says long life, beauty, happiness, status, or fame. Not so much fame, but status like good reputation. Yeah, more like a good reputation. And number 5, rebirth in heaven. You can interpret that any way you want. Number 5, rebirth in heaven. We can say for ourselves. So the Buddha at that time is speaking to people who I think probably have not heard the Pure Land yet. For us, number 5 would be rebirth in the Pure Land, for example. Unless you want to get rebirth in the heavens, then you can take number 5 to be rebirth in heaven. So the Buddha says, these 5 are welcome, agreeable, pleasant, and hard to obtain in the world, which is, kind of true. Some people may say family or career. Well, I think that comes under number 3, happiness that is connected to your everyday life. Okay, so then let's move on. Buddha says, now I tell you, these 5 things are not to be obtained by reason of prayers or wishes. If they were to be obtained by reason of prayers or wishes, who here would like them? Buddha says it's not fitting for the disciple of the noble ones who desires long life to pray for it or to delight in doing so. Instead, the disciple of the noble ones who desires long life should follow the path of practice leading to long life. In so doing, he will attain long life, either human or divine. So how many of you, okay, knowing this, okay, knowing the Buddha says, and the Buddha's logic is really sound. He says, you can't get these 5 things through praying or through wishing for it. Let's look at the 5 things again, okay? Let me move back one slide. Long life, okay? Long life, you can also say an uncomplicated life, like free from illness, because even if you have a long life, but you're always having suffering and your body doesn't cooperate, that doesn't make one happy. So long life, you can also put in a life that is fairly free from serious illness. Beauty, happiness, status, or a good reputation, and rebirth in heaven or the Pure Land. Okay, so this 5 things, the Buddha says, no matter how much you pray for it or wish for it, you're never going to get it. So how many of us do that in our Buddhist practice? How many of us in our Buddhist practice, we pray for, or we ask for these 5 things? Okay, so Buddha is saying, if your praying or your wishing for it works, then everyone would have it. You know, no one would die young. Everyone would be rich. Everyone would have a good reputation. Okay, so what the Buddha says is, instead, the disciple of the noble ones who desires long life should follow the path of practice leading to long life. In other words, because of cause and effect, if you want long life, then you have to do the things that contribute to you having a long life. Okay, so one of the things that leads to a long life is the first precept, which is the precept of non-harming. If you don't harm and kill other living beings, then retribution is not the right word. Retribution seems more like a punishment kind of thing. The outcome of that, either in your present, I'm not sure, maybe present, but definitely in your lives to come, is that you are generating the effect of a long life. All right. And the Buddha goes on to say, he repeats, he says, it's not fitting for the disciple of the noble one who desires beauty, who desires happiness, who desires status, who desires rebirth in the Pure Land, to pray for it or to delight in doing so. Instead, the disciple of the noble ones who desires beauty, who desires happiness, etc., should follow the path of practice leading to either beauty, happiness, or status. It says, in doing so, he will attain or she will attain the goal of those. All right. Then moving on, the Buddha summarizes himself. He says, long life, beauty, status, honor, heaven, high birth. To those who delight in aspiring for these things in great measure continuously, the wise praise heedfulness in making merit. The wise person, heedful, acquires a twofold welfare. Welfare in this life and welfare in the next. By breaking through to his welfare, he's called prudent and wise. Okay, so the Buddha makes it very clear. Last week we saw the passage that says, I'm born of my karma, I'm heir to my karma, everything I have is a result of my karma. We are responsible for ourselves. What we have in this world, whatever happens to us, the wealth that we have, the family, is a direct result of the seeds that we planted from before. So one of the most important things to understand from the teaching of cause and effect as taught by the Buddha is that we have to be responsible for ourselves. If we don't do it for ourselves, we're not going to get it. So that's why they use the analogy of a garden for karmic result. You have your own plot of land, and whatever you desire to eat, you have to plant it yourself. If you don't like bitter gourd, don't plant bitter gourd. Don't sow the seeds of bitter gourd. But the problem is you have to understand how to identify the seeds. You have to know when to water, what seeds or what plants require how much water and the type of soil, so that you can nurture and get in the end what you want. Just give me one moment. Let me stop someone's video. Okay. So sorry, just give me one moment. Okay. So how do we do that? How do we get long life, beauty, status, honor, heaven, high birth? Well, that's what we're doing in this class. The 5 precepts play a huge role in this, and generosity as well. For example, we've talked about a long life or a life free from harm is because you practice the precept of non-harming and non-killing. And in one, I think it was in class number 49, I believe, there was the sutra says that the 5 precepts are the 5 great gifts that a person can do, meaning you hold the precepts on not just for yourself, but actually in the mind, you hold the precepts because of your relationships, of the people around you. Okay. Which brings us to Ron's question. Ron's question is, a layperson is never far from handling money. Even after we retire, it doesn't end there. One has to spend time tending to one's retirement funds. What is the proper view, thinking, and action in regards to one's finances while as a Buddhist? Well, Ron, according to the suttas and what we've covered in our previous classes, the Buddha says that if you have if you are able to, a wise person would first use the money wisely for themselves and their family and friends and dear ones and relatives, to make sure that they are taken care of. That means don't be stingy. And now we just finished the Buddha's this Ita Sutta, where the Buddha speaks to the lay disciple Anathapindika. What I understand from Anathapindika is that he's always using his wealth to generate merit, meaning everything that he does, the difference between blessings and merit is that blessings and merit are both wholesome deeds. You can do the same thing. 2 people can do the same thing, but the person that does it with the intention of may this wholesome act contribute towards the ending of my suffering. That means you are generating neither bright nor dark karma. That's merit, because with everything that you do, your intention is to get closer to your Buddha nature, as how the 6 Precepts explain it. So that would be merit. If you do it with just for, in this sutta, for example, you just want long life, beauty, status, honor, and a good birth, not counting rebirth in Pure Land. If rebirth in Pure Land will be counted as merit. But if you wish for other things that still, they are wholesome things, but they still bring you back within samsara, that would be considered as blessings, because you are not ready, or you have not thought about ending suffering yet. You have maybe other things on your mind. So that will be classified as blessings or bright karma. All right. Okay, let's move on to understanding cause. So Ron, or anyone here, if you have issues thinking that you might be too attached to money or thinking too much about money, you can focus your energy on, instead of just thinking about the money, think of how you can generate merit with your wealth. That's a much better thing to do. Okay. So there's a sutta called the how do you pronounce this? Nibidika. If anyone knows how to pronounce it, please help. Nibidika Sutta. where the Buddha explains that karma is action, but not all action is only volitional action. It's action that you undertake on and that you are intentional in doing. And that's very, very important because it separates, it weeds out superstitious belief about Buddhism, which given how long Buddhism has existed, there's a lot of superstitious belief. The Buddha says karma is a mental event, a factor originating in the mind, which seeks to actualize the mind's drives, dispositions, and purposes. That's a bit hard to understand. So meaning karma is not random, it's not accidental. Okay, in one of the translations, the Buddha is translated as monks. It is volition that I call action or karma. Having will, one performs an action through body, speech, or mind. So everything that we do through our body, speech, and mind, there is an intention that comes before it. And that intention is what creates karma. So when I say there's a lot of people who don't understand that karma is created through volitional action, if you don't understand that, then you open yourself up to a lot of fear in Buddhism. And I have a real life example. So recently, a few months back, there was an offering of a tea mug made of glass. It's a very nice tea mug. It has it's for tea, so it is how you call it, double wall. There's like vacuum in the mug. So if you pour in something hot, like hot water, it stays hot for a long time. So this thing was made of glass, and it's for tea because it comes with a filter that you can put in. And it had the Heart Sutra inscribed on it in Chinese. So so it was exactly what I wanted. I had a false thought about drinking tea, but I didn't have a proper vessel. And I think 1 or 2 months later, this mug showed up. So I decided to use it. But a few people were surprised. They said, "Oh, you're going to use that?" I said, "Yes." And they said, "But it has the Heart Sutra on it." And I thought that would be a good thing, you know, but it actually made people afraid to use the it's not a mug, it's a flask. Yeah, I think flask is a better term. So because the flask had a Heart Sutra and it was made of glass, meaning it was breakable, people were afraid to use it. And it made me curious. So I asked them, I said, why? He said, what happens if you break it, if you break the flask, since it's made of glass? And then you get the retribution of breaking something that has the Heart Sutra on it. So, so that's why understanding volition when it comes to creating karma and in other words, in maintaining our precepts is really, really important. Because without understanding the role of intention or volition, then a lot of people become really afraid to do a lot of things without understanding how cause and effect works. So by using the flask that has the Heart Sutra on it, if it breaks but it is not intentional, then the Buddha explained that you don't create any karma because the intention isn't there. For all of us who have taken the precepts, for example, the 5 precepts in the classes, it lists down the factors that you need to, we are taught what it means to break a precept. So for example, the precept against stealing, we are taught first to look at the mind. Did you have an intention against stealing? So intention plays a huge role. So if you take something that doesn't belong to you, but you mistakenly thought it was because it looks like something that you already have. And then when you realize, oh, this doesn't belong to me, this is actually someone else's, I made a mistake, and you put it back. You don't break the precept of stealing because you had no intention to take something that wasn't yours. But for someone who doesn't understand volitional action, they go through life looking at the action just based on purely the action itself and not the heart or the spirit and the mind behind the action. So you start to judge people based on what they do instead of trying to understand why they did it. And if you look at the problems in this world, a lot of oppression, a lot of suffering comes in this world because human beings have a tendency to judge people just based on their words or based on the things that they do without taking the time or giving them the space to explain the motives or the intention behind their acts or their speech. So it becomes really unfair and very superficial life, where sometimes you know what you mean, but if you don't know how to say in a way that other people find pleasing, it's very hard to communicate because you are only judged based on words and not on language instead of the intention behind the language. You're not given the space for that to happen. Okay, so let's explore this Nibbidika Sutta a bit further. Okay, this sutta is translated as penetrative, meaning understanding or penetrative wisdom. Okay, so the Buddha in this sutta says, and this is an excerpt, this is not the entire sutta. The entire sutta is a bit lengthy. So in this sutta, the Buddha says karma should be known. It says the cause by which karma comes into play should be known. The diversity in karma should be known. The result of karma should be known. The cessation of karma should be known. And the path of practice for the cessation of karma should be known. Why is this important? Because karma is why we keep getting reborn. Karma is the reason why we are here. Karma is the reason for all the afflictions and problems in our lives that we don't want. But karma is also the reason how we can get to the Pure Land. Karma is also the key to how we can end our own suffering and come back and help our all living beings end their suffering as well. All right. And most importantly, with every karma is created through our body, speech, and mind. So how should we regulate our thoughts, our speech, and the actions of body? Okay. Buddha says, intention, I tell you, is karma. Intending, one does karma by way of body, speech, and intellect. And what is the cause by which karma comes into play? Buddha says, contact is the cause by which karma comes into play. Meaning, when do we see karma arising? When do the effects of the causes that we planted in this life or past lives, when do they come into being? The Buddha says contact. What is contact? Contact is when, say, your eye sees something and the eye consciousness arises. So the faculty of the eye, the form of the eye, sees light that's reflected from an object, and the combination of the two results in the eye consciousness arising. That's classified as contact. In other words, our daily experiences. As long as we are, say, alive, or our consciousness is arising, actually not just alive, but even dead, that we is only our body that dies, our consciousness is still intact, karma arises. In other words, when does karma stop? Is when we end our samsaric existence. Okay. Buddha says, and what is the diversity of in karma? Buddha says there's karma to be experienced in hell, karma to be experienced in the realm of common animals, karma to be experienced in the realm of the hungry ghost, karma to be experienced in the human world, karma to be experienced in the world of the devas or the heavens. This is called the diversity in karma. In other words, everything that we do is specific. If we act like animals, Shufu says in the book, The 10 Dharma Realms, every time we act like an animal, how does an animal act? Animal doesn't, in general, an animal doesn't share their food. They are very, they can be very quick-tempered. They can be seen as very emotional and very easily distracted. It's hard for an animal to pay attention to what's going on. They get distracted really quickly. You are planting the very specific karma in the animal realm. So in other words, there are certain karma. How am I going to put this? Karma only arises under specific conditions. So if we plant the cause for being in the heavens, then those effects arise when cause us to be reborn in the heavens and arise when we are reborn in the heavens. And then there's human specific karma, there's hell specific karma, there's hungry ghost specific karma. So in thought after thought, action after action, speech after speech, if we follow the Buddha's example, then guess what? You are planting, you are molding yourself as a Buddha, and you end up as a Buddha. Maybe not immediately, but that's the causes that you plant. So that's what practice is all about. That's why we have the 5 precepts. That's why we have the Bodhisattva Precepts. The Bodhisattva Precepts are meant to make us understand how at our limited capacity, how a Bodhisattva would act and how a Bodhisattva would think. We have to, when we undertake the precepts, then how a Bodhisattva thinks, we have to wrestle with that ourselves, because that can only arise from our own understanding. But the Bodhisattva Precepts teaches us how a Bodhisattva would act. So we follow the acts of a Bodhisattva. So eventually we become a Bodhisattva. It's very simple. It's just cause and effect. It doesn't happen because you want to be one. It doesn't happen because you wish to be one and you don't do anything about it. It's not going to happen. You have to take the wants and the wishes and the prayers. Now people say prayers and thoughts. You have to channel all that into an effective action. Then you get the result. Okay. So the Buddha talks about the diversity of karma, meaning there is specific karma that only arises. So karma, meaning karma only arises under the specific conditions that are tied to the causes which it was planted. So there's karma that's specific to the conditions. I'm not doing a very good job. I hope people can understand. If not, if you have any questions, next week, if there are questions next week, maybe I'll try to explain a bit better. I understand it, but I don't have the right language for it, probably because I don't understand it that well. Okay. In our next slide, we have this. The Buddha asks, what is the result of karma? It says there's three sorts of results of karma, or 3 ways karma can manifest. It can arise right here and now in the present. It can arise later in this lifetime, and that which arises following that, meaning in future lifetimes. And this is the result of karma. Okay. And then the Buddha says, what is the cessation of karma? It says, from the cessation of contact is the cessation of karma, and just this noble eightfold path, which is what we're doing right now, connected to precepts. Buddha says, right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration is the way leading to the cessation of karma. So it's actually really simple. We may not really understand karma, but that's what we are doing now, exploring first through right view. And then second one, right resolve, is also right intention. And depending on how far we get in this week's class, we are going to get to the next component of right intention. So right intention, how to put it, meaning how do we hold the 5 precepts in the right way? So right now we are looking at right view and connecting it to the 5 precepts, meaning how do we understand the role of precepts? And we are looking at it from a karmic point of view at the moment. But that's only half the story, because intention is very, very important as well. How do we hold the 5 precepts so that we can generate the merit that takes us out of samsara, if that's what you wish? And so that's what we're doing. Okay. Let me see. I have some notes here. So when it comes to intention, why understanding intention is very important? Because intention is important in Buddhism, we do not force people into practice. We cannot tell someone to do something without them understanding the reason. So Ethan last week had a question about the Great Compassion Mantra. For the Great Compassion Mantra to be truly effective, you need to have the right intention and the right view behind the Great Compassion Mantra. And it's not just the act of doing it, like we've talked about earlier. It's not just the form, but it's also the intention behind it. So when you force someone, they do it, but if they don't understand, or they get resentful because they feel oppressed, then they do it without right view and right intention. So it's not the doing. In Buddhism, it's not just the doing that counts. It's the willingness and the understanding and the goal or the vows behind the practice that actually makes all the difference. And that's what makes Buddhism very, very different from other religions that tend, or I wouldn't say religions, that's wrong, from other people who tend to judge other people based on what they do, rather on why they do, or in understanding why they do it. Okay. So the Buddha says suffering should be known and its source, diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to its cessation should be known. Okay, what is suffering? Rebirth, old age, illness, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. Not getting what you wish for, and the 5 grasping aggregates, or the 5 skandhas, are suffering. What are the 5 skandhas? That's basically our experience of reality. From a, if you ever experience deep samadhi, you will realize what it means when they say the 5 skandhas are suffering. So Buddha, okay, let's go to the next slide before I start talking. And the Buddha says, what is the source of suffering? Craving is a source of suffering. And what is the diversity of suffering? It says there is suffering that is severe, mild, slow to fade, and quick to fade. That is the diversity of suffering. There's all kinds of suffering. Wait, before I go to the next slide. So the first line here, what is the source of suffering? Craving is a source of suffering. When we go to right intention, if you can remember this line, we will see that one of the right intention that we should have when we practice anything in Buddhism has to, should have to do with reducing our craving or our desires or our attachments, because that is the source of suffering. Which is why if you practice well, like someone who holds the 5 precepts well over time, or you see some monastics or people who just practice for a long time, they're pretty happy. Not all, but those who practice well, there's a certain calmness and happiness that they have. Yeah. So Buddha says, what is the result of suffering? Is when someone is overcome and overwhelmed by suffering, sorrows and wails and laments, beating their breasts and falling into confusion. Or else overcome by that suffering, they begin an external search wondering who knows one or two phrases to stop this suffering. The result of suffering is either confusion or a search, I say. This is called the result of suffering. This is pretty apparent now. If we look at what's going on in the world, there are a lot of people in distress, either for themselves or for their loved ones. And unfortunately, this is a reality for them right now. And then Buddha says, what is the cessation of suffering? How can we end our afflictions? Buddha says, when craving ceases, suffering ceases. The practice that leads to the cessation of suffering is simply this Noble Eightfold Path. And we've gone through that: right view, right thought or right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right immersion. Whereas when a noble disciple understands suffering in this way, they understand that this penetrative spiritual life is a cessation of suffering. So the last sentence says that us as a disciple of the Buddha, when we understand suffering, then we see that, oh, the way out is a Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path is actually very straightforward. It's not difficult to understand and put into practice. So last week we said that a lot of people, they try to escape from the sufferings of life because they either feel resigned to it, they fear it a lot, and most of the time it's because they do not know that there's a solution. So without thinking that you're helpless, you push it to a corner of your mind. But we are not helpless. We have full responsibility for ourselves, and the Buddha says the Noble Eightfold Path. If we just take the time to understand and investigate, we find that, oh, okay, this is a way out. And not just that, the more I practice, actually, the better my life becomes. But it's something that you can only find out once you start understanding and putting into practice. So what would someone be like if they do not understand all this? Okay, so there's a very famous story in, it's not a story actually, it's a story, but it's something that actually happened, it's a fact. This person's name is Kesa Gotami. And many people know this story. It's Kesa Gotami and the mustard seed. So as we go through her story is really similar to being in hell, where the thoughts that you generate in your mind are purely emotional, and it's kind of like a loop. It goes around in the circle and it never ends. Logic and understanding becomes unreliable, or there's no space for logic and understanding because it's all filled up with emotion. So it's kind of like being in a dream. You're just very confused. So let's go through this sutta. It's actually a sutta. It says the victor Padu Muttara was a master of everything. That leader arose in the world 100,000 eons hence. So this is the Buddha, a previous Buddha called Padu Muttara. I then lived in Hamsawati, born in an undistinguished clan. Having approached the best of men, I went to him as my refuge. As I listened to his Dharma containing the Four Noble Truths, supremely sweet like honey, which brings happiness and mental peace. One time the hero, the Buddha, was placing in that foremost place a Buddhist nun who wore rough robes. He praised her the ultimate man or woman. Why is the sutra so weird? It's beginning like this. It's because Gotami or Kesa Gotami, at this point when she was recounting this, she had gone through a lot of suffering. She met the Buddha, she decided to practice, and she became an arhat. And after that, she recounted how her journey in Buddhism began. So she begins with a memory of one of her past lives, where she was in front of a Buddha called Padumuttara. So this is very an interesting story. So producing not a little joy hearing that Buddhist nuns virtue, doing service for the Buddha, according to powers and strengths, bowing down to the hero sage, I aspired to attain that place. The Sambuddha approved for that attainment of that foremost place. In 100,000 eons arising in Otaka's clan, the one whose name is Gotama will be the teacher in the world. Worthy heir to that one's Dharma, Dharma's legitimate offspring, the one named Kesa Gotami will be the teacher's follower. So, in this present life, after she became an arhat, a sage where she has ended all suffering, she has ended birth and death, she is telling her story about the first time you could say, her body resolved in a way. Let me move back to the previous slide. When her resolve began, that seed. So this is when she planted the seed. And how she planted the seed was because she was inspired by one of the Buddha's nuns, a Buddhist nun who wore rough robes. And that's very important, rough robes, because we'll come back to that. Rough robes meaning, I guess it signifies that this particular Buddhist nun was very ascetic in her practice. She's very disciplined. And when the Buddha Padumuttara praised her, Kesa Gotami at that time made the wish, okay, that she wanted to be like that. And if you ask, maybe I wouldn't use the word wish, she made a vow, okay. A vow leads to action, whereas a wish, I think the difference between a vow and a wish is just words, but in terms of understanding, I would say a vow, as in the Buddhist sense, leads to an action. It leads to a transformation of your habits, whereas a wish is just merely wanting something, but it doesn't change anything in anything that you do or in the way you think. Okay, so going back to this slide, so that Buddha knew her thoughts, Kesa Gotami's thoughts, and gave her a prediction. That is how powerful her vow is. It's not a vow that we tend to, maybe some of us make vows that are very casual, very empty, doesn't lead to anything. But in her, it was such a powerful vow that on that spot, she received a prediction that in the future, there will be a Buddha whose name is Gotama. Guess whose Buddha that is? And that there's going to be a person called Kesa Gotami who will become this Buddha's disciple. Okay. And then she continues, at that time being overjoyed, as long as life, heart full of love, I attended on the victor, the guide, providing requisites. Due to that karma done very well, with intention and firm resolve, discarding my human body, I went to the Tavatimsa or Trayatrimsha heaven. In this present lucky aeon, Brahma's kinsman, greatly famed one, the Buddha known as Kashyapa, was born, the best of debaters. The attendant of the great sage was the ruler of men back then, the king of Kasi, named Kiki in Benares, the greatest city. Okay, so she said that after being a devout follower of the Buddha and her practice, she was reborn in the Triumphant heaven, which is where, let me see, if I'm not wrong, that's where Lady Maya, our Shakyamuni Buddha's mother, was reborn to. Let me see, because there's two heavens that I always get confused with, and one of them is a Triumphant. Okay, anyway, that's not relevant to this story. Let's move on to it says, Kesa Gotami, saying that I was his fifth royal daughter, this king's daughter, well known by the name of Dharma. Hearing the best victor's teaching, I chose to seek ordination. Our father did not permit it. We stayed at home during that time. Comfortable royal maidens doing our practice with vigor in virginal celibacy for 20 times 1,000 years, fond of waiting on the Buddha, the king's 7 joyful daughters. So the king had 7 daughters, and they were very wholesome in their life. And Kesa Gotami actually wanted to be a nun in this lifetime, but her father, the king, did not allow. So she recounts this. She says, Samani, Samana Gutta, Bhikkhuni, Bhikkhadayika, Dhamma, Sudama, and 7 Sangha, Sangha Dayika. These are the names. What are these? These are the names of herself and her the 6 other sisters, the 7 daughters. And she says, now Kema, Upalawana, now they are known in this present life. They are known as Kema, Upalawana, Patachara, and Kundala. The nun Damadina and I and Visakha is the 7th. If you go and investigate the sutras, you will find that these 7 ladies, these 7 women who were 7 sisters in one of their past lives during, let me go back one slide, during the Buddha known as Kasyapa was born, during Buddha Kasyapa's time, these 7 sisters, in this time, when Buddha Shakyamuni was around, there were actually 7 nuns. They all became nuns under Shakyamuni Buddha. And not just that, these 7 nuns were the foremost, were in a group of the foremost nuns of the Buddha. So Kema was known for her great wisdom, and Upalawana was known for her psychic powers. And then Patachara was known for memorizing all the texts on discipline, on monastic training. And then Kundala, she's normally referred to in the text as Bada Kundala Kesa, was known for her swift insight into wisdom. And then Dhammadina was known for being able to explain and teach on the teachings. And then Visakha was, they were all nuns except Visakha. Visakha was the chief patroness of the Buddha. So Anatta Pindika was chief patron of the Buddha. That means of the lay disciples, he was known as someone who was the most sincere and had the blessings to do, to back up his sincerity. Visakha was the chief patroness of the Buddha. And Kesa Gotami, the person who is recounting her own story, she was known for wearing coarse robes, because when she first made her vow, what inspired her was a nun that was also wearing coarse robes. So cause and effect. And what does coarse robes mean? Again, coarse robes, we can take it to mean that she was really disciplined in her practice. She was very ascetic. There's a list of 13 Dhutanga practices that the Buddha laid out that are voluntary. And her counterpart on the monk side would be Mahakasyapa, who was known to be very Mahakasyapa, Mahakachana. I think it's Mahakasyapa. Don't take my word for it. It's either Mahakasyapa or Mahakachana, who was famous for his ascetic practices, who I believe at 120 years old, or an amazing long age, like more than 100 years, the Buddha seeing him still doing all these ascetic practices, like sleeping, sitting up, wearing only coarse robes, and only sleeping under trees. The Buddha went to him and said, given your old age, shouldn't you, like lead a more comfortable life? Kind of like that. That was the Buddha's intention. And he said, no, I'll continue doing this because for 2 reasons. One, it brings me great joy. And the second one is that he does it in the hope of inspiring future monastics in the future. meaning to this present day and beyond. So just like how Kesa Gotami was inspired when she saw a nun doing the ascetic or the Tutanga practices, Mahakasyapa, when asked by the Buddha, maybe you should, relax a bit since you're so old. And he said, no, I'm doing this, because I find it enjoyable. And so monks have a very different idea of what enjoyable is. And not just that, but he sees it as a way to inspire people in the future who become monastics. Okay, so getting on with our story, we have a few minutes left. Maybe we will keep the, so the next slide that I have is then Kesa Gotami explaining her present side of the story. So she explains her past and how she came to be where she was, but she hasn't explained what happened in this life yet, how she became a monk. She only gave the causes for her present conditions, but she hasn't explained the causes that she planted in her present life yet. And because it's time, it's a very interesting story, but because it's time, I guess we will keep it for next week. And let me look at the chat box. Ron has a question. He says, when I see mosquitoes or tiny mites or fleas, I'm really bothered. I usually catch insects inside the house and free it outside, but mosquitoes and tiny fleas are difficult to catch, so I wind up killing them so they do not bite and cause suffering. What can I do to improve this situation? Okay. First of all, I sympathize with you, Ron, because I have experienced flea bites before, and because I am severely allergic to flea bites, the itchiness that it causes me, it's really, really bad. One flea bite will last maybe a month or two. So I really sympathize with your situation. I've heard or I've read that Shufu at certain times, I'm not quite sure of the context, but he would say even an ant, you should be very careful not to kill. But there's also stories where I heard, for example, when in I think in the 70s or the 60s, when they purchased a hotel, Giri Hotel in San Francisco, and the place was infected with bed bugs, and they were trying all sorts of ways not to kill the bed bugs, but Shufu said that they should call in exterminators. I don't have the wisdom to truly understand and not just understand, but to extract the principles and apply it to other examples. I'm just saying that there are these two stories that I recall to mind about how the guidelines that Shufu gave for those specific conditions. I would say try your best in not harming, and not just not harming, but actually not harming them too. Okay. What I do know is that there are stories, and I know some of the people who are listening right now who have personal stories of their own and who have shared before about how if you, with a really sincere heart, you have, it sounds funny, but in your heart, you have a conversation with these insects, and you explain to them that, okay, for example, in my family, I remember that we had termites in the house, and termites are extremely destructive. They were in the dining table, and so what my mom did, because she understood the Dharma at that time, is that she wrote a note to the termites and she pasted it where the termites were. And the note said that please stop destroying our property, and because if you continue doing so to protect our property, we would have no choice but to maybe treat the wood or something that will cause you great harm. And could you please leave and find a new home? But it's not just that, asking the termites to leave. But what my mom did was to recite the great compassion mantra on behalf of the termites. And every other story I've heard is along very, very similar lines. It could be ants, it could be termites, it could be other things, but it's along very similar lines where they recited the great compassion mantra and it works. After a while, maybe with a bit of patience, the problem actually goes away. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is when you get bitten. I know it's very difficult, but pay close attention to the thoughts that arise as you get bitten, and you want to be able to. It's a great opportunity for you to be able to transform any thoughts of anger or irritation, animosity or hatred that you have as they arise, to transform that, because that's how you say it, that's what the 5 precepts are meant to do. So it's an excellent opportunity to practice and to be responsible for yourself, and to be mindful of the karmic seeds that we are laying down. Okay. Anyone else? Anything to add to Ron's question, or any other questions? Okay, if not, then next week we'll do a quick recap of what we've been doing so far, because we've been spending a lot of time on precepts as how it relates to precepts, and how precepts are part of the Noble Eightfold Path, and cause and effect. Because if there's no cause and effect, then we wouldn't need precepts at all. And we'll also continue with the story of Kesa, Gotami. There's actually 2 versions of Kesa, Gotami, both extremely tragic and heart-wrenching, and we'll see what happens. Okay, it's a very interesting story. It's a very quick one. So, and after that we do our vows. So this story is during Buddha Shakyamuni's time. The Buddha and a group of monks I think they were on their alms round, or they were walking from one place to the other. They came across a village, and when the village heard that the monks were around, they were very happy. They came out, and I don't remember the name of the monk, but all the villagers were very respectful to one monk, and they ignored the Buddha completely, and this made the other monks very confused. It's like, do these villagers know that this is the Buddha and not this other monk? And so the Buddha explained that in many lifetimes ago, this particular monk was walking and he came across a beehive that was floating in the water, or in a puddle of water. So out of compassion, he wanted to save the bees from drowning, I guess because maybe the beehive was taking in water. So very carefully, he picked up the beehive and placed it in a dry place so that the bees would be safe. And the Buddha says, now, in this present life, those bees from the beehive are the villagers that you see in front of you. And this monk that they are all respecting and venerating was the person who saved the beehive. So out of their karmic affinities, they naturally felt really happy with this particular monk, to the point that they, I think, kind of like the Buddha wasn't the main person anymore, and this monk was. Yeah. So can you imagine if we harm any living being, then what would happen? Right? So cause and effect is something that once we are aware of, we should really pay attention to. If I can find the particular sutta where the Buddha spoke this, I'll try to find it. But for now, it's just something that's in my memory. Okay, everyone ready? May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Let's bow to the Buddhas. Okay, 3 bows. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Bowing respect to the Venerable Master. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. Amitofo.
Thank you, Dhamma Master.